Welcome to Resilience Matters by Starr Commonwealth, a podcast dedicated to understanding trauma and exploring the transformative power of resilience. I'm Ben Reed, and in today's episode, I'm joined by my co-host Kathy Hart, Senior Director of Learning Services and Solutions here at Starr. And together, we're honored to welcome an extraordinary guest. Her name is Stefanie Lachenauer, New Jersey's 2024-2025 State Teacher of the Year. A veteran educator and national leader in mindfulness and trauma-informed education, Stefanie leads her district's initiatives in social emotional learning and wellness and resilience-focused practices. And she is a Starr certified trauma and resilience trainer. Stefanie is also the author of the forthcoming book, Let the Glitter Settle, Mindfulness for Teens, a toolkit for young people navigating stress and seeking balance. As part of her recognition as Teacher of the Year, she is currently on a sabbatical, visiting schools, speaking with educators, and advancing conversations about student wellness and the power of compassionate teaching. Stefanie's story is inspiring and it's practical, a testament to how trauma-informed practices and authentic connection can change lives. Okay, let's go ahead and listen to the conversation.
What really drew you into education and your passion for teaching and educating?
I was one of the kids who always knew they were going to be a teacher. I didn't play with my stuffed animals, though, because my parents gave me two sisters, so I had two live subjects to play school with. And, they just loved that. So, but I taught them anything I was learning. Like, I loved watching them learn it. And I loved that they were like the first kid in their grade who could like spell hard words, or, I loved helping them with math and all of that. So I actually went to school for elementary education. And I thought that was it. Like, that's what I'm going to do. I love like little kids and I loved teaching and learning with them. But I also had some time in a middle school classroom. And that's when I was like, oh, this is the sweet spot. Like middle schoolers, like I get to use a lot of what I learned as an elementary school teacher, but middle schoolers are in that spot right now where their life is just in all this transition and they're still figuring it out. And there's just so much happening. And I remember that time in my life was so challenging and tumultuous. And I was like, I want to be that solid force there for them. I want to be that steady rock. I want to be that person who can share all the things I wish I knew and just be there to listen and help them on their journey.
I just love that so much because that is such a challenging age and such a challenging experience for teachers and students alike. So, and we need adults to come alongside our kids, especially in adolescence, because they're going, like I said, it's such a tumultuous time. So as a part of your journey, you became really interested, and that's how we met, in trauma-informed and resilience-focused education. So can you share a little bit about that?
So that journey it took a little while, but it initially started in my beginning of teaching. And I was, teaching middle school and noticing that they were really stressed out. Like they were experiencing stress and they didn't have coping skills. And I was like, I got to do something. So I was implementing all the things I learned. I practiced yoga at the time, and I was like, I want to learn more that I can share with them. So I got certified in yoga. And then that took me to getting certified in mindfulness because I was practicing mindfulness through the yoga. And that was really helpful and wonderful. And as that journey kept going, I was like, well, there's more underlying things. It's not just about teaching the skills. I'm realizing there's more I need to know about what's going on with my students. And our school district, we actually started a trauma-informed team that I was a part of. And we had a training and it was great. And we worked together to share some professional development. But I'm the kind of person who I'm like, I want more. I want more. I want more. I want to learn all the things. And I came across Starr actually during, I think it was the pandemic. Yeah, it was during the pandemic. And they were offering those courses. And I just took as many as I could. And then I was like, wow, I love this. And because I'm sharing it already in school, I really wanted to do the training program. So that was kind of how that built that way.
Is there a particular moment in time that you can think of that you're just like, I have to do more. I have to find more?
I was teaching sixth grade social studies, and there was a student who I was in the hall with often having like kind of crying meltdowns and, often just sitting and being with him, which was helpful, but I knew that there was more to what was going on. And some of the behaviors that I was seeing in the classroom and also some of the things about his background. And I was like, there's more that I need to know to be prepared to help support. So that was, it was a couple different times like that where I'm in the hallway, like there's only so many breathing practices and this is not cutting it. I need to understand more about this.
That drives me still to learn to this day. Like if someone asks me a question in training and I don't feel like I have the best answer, or I feel like I need to know more about something, that still drives me to want to learn and research things because I want to, give people the most help I can. So I totally relate to that, as I'm sure a lot of our listeners will as well. I had the pleasure of meeting you when you came through our Train the Trainer program in our educational vertical. Like I said, I still remember that, and that was awesome. When you started going through our courses to become a practitioner, and then when you took the training to become a trainer, what can you share with us about anything that helped you through that journey, what changed about your teaching philosophy, or what you learned at Starr influenced your teaching philosophy and your efforts to build that trauma-informed, resilience-focused environment in your classroom?
Being trauma-informed, we know, and trauma-sensitive, it really is a mindset. And I feel like I had some of the basis of that mindset. Like I really never believed that there was such thing as a bad kid. But I think that's what drew me in. Like that was one of the first slides. I was like, yes, I agree. But I think having more of a framework to work with is what really supported and helped me. I love that circle of courage. I just find that so helpful. Sometimes we have all these different ideas and we kind of know a little bit about what we should be doing, but when we don't have some kind of framework or some kind of structure to work with, it can be really challenging. So I love that because it keeps everything focused and it really helps me to think about all different aspects of that child's life. So using that circle is I just think it's one of the most helpful things. And being able to talk to students about that as well.
With the model of resilience around the circle of courage, when you meet the kids' needs of belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity, that you'll see the unwanted behaviors decrease. And then I see that happen all the time in schools. And it really helps increase educators' sense of efficacy, that they can help manage these difficult classroom behaviors. And what research tells us, that no matter what else is happening in their lives, when we nurture and or restore their resilience through that circle of courage, that we can help them. So a lot of times, I know, like with my past experiences, I've always felt, shouldn't say always, but I would have often feel like there's nothing I can do because of the situations are happening to our young people outside of the time I spent with them. And so I've really seen a lot of teachers feel supported and feel like there is something I can do, which a lot of times, that really helps with some of the secondary trauma or vicarious trauma we experience as caregivers because of what our kids have been experiencing. Especially, we know that more kids than ever are living with caregivers that are experiencing depression, anxiety, and other mental illnesses post-COVID. And so it's important now more than ever that we're supporting our kids this way. So I love that you love the circle of courage as well.
Yes, and I love talking to parents and educators too about the concept of unmet needs, right? When we think about behavior is communication. It's communicating something to us, and it's communicating that there's an unmet need. So finding that need, that really changes everything. And I was just doing a parent workshop actually on social media and talking about phone usage and all of that. And so we talked a lot about looking at all the issues through that lens, really helps to give the power back and start thinking about, okay, well, what can we do then so we can meet those needs and change that behavior? Because otherwise it's a fight. It's just a fight between wills, and that gets us nowhere.
Nobody wins in a power struggle. Right from the get-go, right? You lost and they lost. And so you're not going to win in a power struggle. And you're right, like the circle of courage is so applicable. I mean, it's all human beings. It's not just kids or kids that struggle. It's applicable for everyone, us too. So I'm going to ask you this question. You've answered it a little bit already with the circle of courage, but what specific strategies or tools from the Starr Commonwealth model have been most impactful in supporting students?
There's so many things, but I love that play is in there because just play is so important. And I love that I get to, when I do this presentation, to talk about that whenever I do the trainings and sharing with staff, especially when there's an administrator in the room, because play is an important piece of that. And accepting that and then finding time to allow that and encouraging that, because kids need that outlet. They learn through play, but it's also great for them in terms of when we think about stress relief too. When all that is building up, they need that outlet to let that all go.
I can't hardly sit through a 2-hour meeting without laughing or making a joke. Like, we all need play. And it's also like, you think about the circle of courage or like the framework that you mentioned earlier, the 10 steps. It creates connection. It helps solidify our sense of belonging. So And it, like you said, it gives them that stress relief. And the research tells us, right, with 15 minutes of play breaks, that we have better learning results from our students. You are a middle school teacher, so what does that look like? What would you like to see play look like at the middle school or secondary levels at all, middle school or high school?
I think having time when there's a break in the day and it's a non-academic time. I know we have in our school, we have a flex time. Some schools do have recess time or a time when they can choose, even like choosing some kind of play activity. We also have self-care days in our school where we do that. But I've seen across the state, there's actually one school I went to that does have those 15-minute blocks. They have 3 15-minute blocks throughout the day for kids that are just play, just recess.
I love that.
Unstructured play.
That's awesome.
And then even within our own classrooms, especially in high school level and middle school, when we have those long class periods, 80 minutes, 90 minutes, that's a long time to be doing work. It's a long time to be in one place, right? Kathy's like, I can't do that.
I'm like, I would have a hard time with that. Where's my break? I need my break.
As a teacher too, so everything that we do is chunked. So it's like, 20 or 15 minute like things that we work on. And then we do breaks in between. We do little brain breaks. That's another thing I like to do in the training is to show some of those brain breaks. And just a few minutes of laughter where we just stop and, it's not about learning or getting any new material, but it's about giving our brains literally just a break to laugh, to have some oxytocin again, just to feel and experience some joy. And then, go back on. Allow ourselves to be humans again just for a little bit.
One of the things that I also really stress when I'm talking about play is, let's not take away those breaks that we do have built in. Like, let's not punish around lunchtime. Unfortunately, I've been in some schools where the lunch detentions are still a thing where kids, like punishment around food is like, it's almost like a trigger for me. Like, let's not do that at all. Where kids are forced to eat in a certain area, they can only have certain foods and they're not allowed to talk. Like, our lunch is a silent lunch because they misbehaved the day before. We're talking middle schools and then are holding kids back from their passing periods to, discuss what they did during class. And then they're running to their next class period. And it's like, would you like that if that was done to you? Like if you're running from meeting to meeting and your boss held you back. So think about like as an adult, would you like that done to you in your workspace? And I get it, maybe we wouldn't have made the choices the students made, but we're fully functioning, hopefully, I'm going to assume, we're fully functioning adults, right? And, our brains are much more developed than these kiddos. And if we wouldn't like it done to us, we wouldn't want to do that to our kids. And so consequences around play, really need to be really careful with that.
I'm so glad you said that. That's another thing that, we talk about often because sometimes those kids who are struggling in the day because it is a long day. Those are the kids who really need it the most. And then they're the kids who are being pulled for, sometimes it's something academic during break times or after school, they have like a longer day because they have more academic things. And they're the kids who really, they could use that playtime.
That's such a great point. The kids who are the kids that, potentially may be having those unwanted behaviors. They're the ones that sometimes we're withholding. And I 100% believe, and more than I do because you're working with educators even more than I am, no one goes into education to do hurtful things to children. These are very well-intentioned, loving adults, right? Educators, professionals. And they're especially those that are holding kids back for academics. I've had a lot of educators say, I really want to help this kid because I know once they get home that everybody's busy and they may not have time to learn, sit down with an adult and learn. But that child's going to be more able to learn if we let them get some of that stress out of their body, right? And get those hormones regulated. And so, it is very well intentioned. I want to be clear about that from my experience. It's not like someone's trying to do something to harm a child. So you also love mindfulness and you've been really engaged in that. What does that look like? When it's really integrated well into a school, when people are practicing mindfulness with their students?
Yeah, so that becomes part of the culture. Right. So right now, all the seventh graders in my school, they go through the course Skills for Success. And so the first 20 minutes we spend on mindfulness. So it's a little mindfulness mini lesson. We do a couple different practices. I teach new skills, and then they have journal and reflection time. So I think a really key important piece to that too is we don't learn just from experience, right? We learn from reflecting on and really integrating that experience. So having that time to journal and to think about, to process and talk about how that mindfulness practice went. I think that's so important. The other piece of that is the more that we're practicing mindfulness and we're growing as a school, the more that we can embody that. So when you're doing something that's whole school mindfulness, everybody is then practicing in some way. And that doesn't mean we're all sitting on mats and we're saying Om or anything like that. It means that we have a staff who is committed to present moment awareness, to paying attention to what's happening. It's kind of like the first step to regulation, right? Mm-hmm. Before I can take a step to regulate myself, I need to know how I'm feeling. So just paying attention to what's happening. And when we're in that state, that's when we can have the most impact on our students. And not only because we're, going to say things that are maybe more articulate or wiser, but because our nervous systems, we're connected to each other. Yeah. So when I'm in a regulated, safe space, I'm also allowing my students to then also regulate with me. But if I'm constantly dysregulated, there's no way that my dysregulation is going to help them to become regulated. And they're not going to learn as well from me either if I'm dysregulated and all over the place. It's just, it's not going to be beneficial.
Well, it can actually cause some dysregulation in them.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we do, like you said, our nervous systems feed off each other, right? We borrow each other's nervous systems, good and bad, unfortunately. And so I love that you made that point. And I've been actually teaching a couple different customers on social and emotional learning. And one of the biggest points in step 4 of our 10 steps to a trauma-informed resilient school is we talk about the first step is emotional awareness. And it goes right in line with what you were talking about. A lot of kids who've experienced stress and trauma, they've had to numb out to survive. They can't feel the feelings, like playing dead in nature, that fight, fight, or freeze. And so that present moment awareness is a part of emotional awareness and understanding what's happening in your body. Like we often just assume people understand what they're feeling in their body. They understand what anger feels like, what worry feels like, what stress feels like. A lot of our young people don't know that. And so having that mindfulness, that present moment awareness absolutely goes into having that social awareness or that emotional awareness of what's even happening inside your own bodies. And so we expect our young people to know these things. And there's a lot of us adults that still struggle with that. Like you said, that regulation piece as well. So I love that you made that differentiation, because some people hear a word and they have a connotation of what it means. And it can mean a lot. There's different stages, right? It can mean different things.
That's right. Absolutely. And I think too, with that knowing emotions, sometimes kids can name it, but they can't necessarily talk about how they feel it in their body. Right.
Sensations,
Yeah. So I love taking time also to work with them on noticing the sensations. So drawing out, when I'm angry, where do I feel anger in my body? Helping them to really sit with that. Where do I feel it? And if it was a color, what color would it be? And if it was a texture, what would that be like? But really noticing and feeling that, because when it comes up, sometimes they're not even I'm angry. They're yelling, right? So if we can start noticing those sensations first, right? Then we're oh, that is anger. I'm really angry. I'm about to use some not great words. Maybe I can take a breath or do something before I get to that stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For anybody listening too, if you have a kid, you're I don't know what happened. They just went from 0 to 10. That's a young person that needs to work on that emotional awareness, because it probably did look like that. You're not wrong. That's because that young person was probably pushing down all those feelings and sensations. Thinking about what a sense of belonging that creates in the community in your classroom. And then you create that deep connection with them and they trust you. And then think about how that translates into I say, and I love your feedback on it. I tell people often, the ultimate job of schools is to create good members of our society, that kids that, people that can go out into the world and be able to give back in some meaningful way. Of course, that's partially, that's academic, right? That they have skills that they can go into the world. But just think about the belonging that you're creating. And then kids trust you with all kinds of things. And then you're, of course, able to teach them academically, but think about all the other things that you're able to teach them as an adult in their life that cares about.
Yeah, and hopefully modeling some of that too, so that they know how to have those kind of conversations and how to be, good members of any group that they're in.
Absolutely. The more and more I've worked in schools, because my background is in counseling, it's so much more than academics. You're an adult role model. You're a role model for all the young people you interact with.
It's funny because with sensitive topics, I feel like most adults, they don't want to talk about it with kids because it's scary. You want to make sure you say the right things, and you don't know what the kids are going to say or what's going to come out. But I find that the students want some of that the most. Like they crave time to talk about things that they feel like maybe they're not allowed to, or they know that other people are scared to talk about. So especially things like mental health. I have a youth action board that I work with. It's a group of high school students, and they work on different issues that they're seeing in the community, and then they think of solutions, and then we come up with either social media clips to share some things about issues that they're seeing, or we have events. But they crave that time to feel like they're in a safe space where they can ask the questions, where they can really talk about it and feel like they're really being heard. And that goes with mental health, but it also goes with things like when kids want to talk about, when we talk about the HIB law, harassment, intimidation, bullying, kids really want to talk about that. They want to understand, like, why do other kids do this? And what do I do when this happens? And, when a kid says this word, what does that even mean? Because sometimes that gets embarrassing to ask that. So when you have that safe place, it's just such a beautiful thing that when kids can really ask those questions and feel like they're not going to be judged and like no one's going to hold it against them, and they can just really be curious and get their answers. Skills for Success is one of my most favorite classes to teach. It was actually first called Character, College, and Career Readiness. And so then seventh graders come in, they're like, so you're going to teach me about how to apply to college? Like, no. It's a set of skills. There's a set of skills and within a standard that we have in New Jersey. So we actually kind of looked at that, reframed it, reworked the course a little bit. And what's really exciting is it's kind of like life coaching for middle school. So we have like personality types they get to learn about. They learn about their strengths. They learn about their learning styles. They learn a little bit about their identity and how they identify, and then also how that fits into like the greater world, like how they see themselves in the world and connecting. In New Jersey, we have a HIB law about harassment, intimidation, and bullying. So I teach a little bit about that. So those identifying terms, that's really important for them to know so that they can keep themselves safe, but also keep each other safe and know what those words mean and how to use them appropriately. Because often they use those words inappropriately because they're curious or they don't know. So it's like a safe space to have that conversation. So that part is in there. And then we talk about stress, the science of it, coping skills, concepts like success, risk, and failure. And then they get to do a little bit of a career project. So they think about, now they learned more about themselves, like what kind of career might I be interested in? They research the career and then they kind of apply it to themselves. So, because I'm an extrovert, being a teacher would be great because I'm with people all the time, right? So something like that. So and they really enjoy that. It's so cool for them to have that experience of learning about themselves and then thinking about like, where might my future go? And it could change, but here's some ideas that I have now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I can't even imagine having something like that in middle school. And so what about the other courses that you've developed? Are these all for the middle school students, like the global leadership, active citizenship? What about those courses?
Yeah. Yep. So active citizenship and global leadership were created kind of around the same time. So at the time, active citizenship was 7th grade, and that was more of like citizenship, civics kind of a class. So it was more like US based. And then global leadership was at the time for 8th graders. So now the civic stuff is mixed into other coursework, so that got moved, but that's okay because global leadership is now for 7th and 8th grade. And that we studied the United Nations Global Goals for Sustainability. And with learning those goals, after each goal, we talk about how can we right now, as 7th and 8th graders, make a change in the world? How can we work towards these goals right now with the skills and tools that we have as middle school students? And so I love that piece because they really have a chance to feel empowered, to take control and to create positive change right now, right here in this moment. Without needing any other tools, without being an adult, just with the skills that you have, there's so many things that we can do. So I love this idea of really empowering them to be change makers and to think about what they care about and do something about that in the world. And we also use a design thinking process. So they come up with, at the end, a final project of one issue they really care about, and then they create a solution to that change.
That also kind of ties back to the circle of courage and the mastery element, which,
Yes.
giving them opportunities of rather than just like the skills of memorization and test taking, it's like you can have an impact in the world, a real impact, and start learning that at such a young age.
Yeah.
You're really interested in these topics of justice and equity. And where did that all begin for you? When did you decide these middle school students needed more education in terms of these kind of social issues?
I think even with just the word justice from the beginning, I can specifically remember like part of why I wanted to be a teacher, being in fourth grade and watching someone treat someone unfairly and a teacher like kind of seeing it, but like pretending to not and then not doing anything about it. And I just remember how like, I just was like devastated in that moment. How can we just like let this continue to happen? So there was always been something in me about like justice and treating people fairly and supporting people. So from like I kind of always had that angle a little bit, like going into education. And then when I started teaching, I used to take the summers to volunteer abroad. And this was before I even started teaching this class. I was teaching social studies, and I just loved these experiences. And in 2014, I actually spent the summer in Dominican Republic volunteering at the Mariposa Foundation, so working to help end generational poverty for girls. And it was an incredible experience. And part of my job there was I worked with service learning groups as they came through. So I helped them reflect on the experiences, to think about the culture, to think about the people who are living there, and just thinking about how it was impacting them and what they were learning. And as I was doing this, I was like, why am I not taking my students? Like, how do I get my students to have this experience? So that was kind of like the point that started to turn everything for me. I was doing Habitat for Humanity builds on my own, but I was like, wait a minute, like if I'm learning so much and I get so much from this, like I would love for my kids to do this. So I actually at the time, and I was just joking with my former superintendent about this, I had written a proposal to take a sabbatical where I was going to live in Dominican Republic and write service learning curriculum. I have no idea why she said no. Like, why wouldn't she just let me go live there? For just a short time.
That's awesome. Maybe next time,
Yeah. I had these great, grandiose ideas, but what they did say at the end of that was like, we know you really are passionate about this and want to do something. Why don't you write a course? Like, you can't live in DR to do that, but like you can write a course from here. So that's how Global Leadership actually had started.
Every time I do a train the trainer cohort, I'm just like, and Ben's heard me say this, I don't even know how many times. We have the most amazing human beings who come alongside of us as trainers. Like, and I just like want to take a bullhorn and scream to everybody. And I say this all the time. I'm just like, and you're just like an example of one of them. And you're amazing. Like, this is the things you're saying. I'm just like, we just have the most amazing humans. I'm just so proud to know you. And I just love that you have that passion and desire to do those things. So thank you for your work on behalf of all the kiddos, and like that you love middle schoolers was enough for me, but
we kind of jumped ahead just to get a little more background about these courses that you've developed. But if we kind of go back to talking about just trauma-informed practices, and with the question, how do you support educators who feel overwhelmed or hesitant about the whole idea of this is another ask, another thing that big responsibility for me to take on to implement this training or these trauma-informed practices. I imagine you come up with this often, not just with implementing trauma-informed practices, but when you say, hey, let's develop a new course called Skills for Success or Global Leadership. And people are like, I'll just teach, social studies. We got the book. Why you got to make it so hard? I imagine like you're kind of helping guide people to push things forward and make change often. So, but in particular with the trauma-informed practices, how have you helped convince the schools and the district how to move forward with this? And it's a really valuable thing.
So I think what's also great about the training that Starr has is it kind of goes through like what things you're already doing. And I think that's always a great place to start. So anytime you're trying something new, and it's new, but it's also not. Like, there's things that we're already doing that are good, trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive practices. And sometimes we just don't know it. So I think helping educators to see how they're already doing some of this. And now how do we build from the things that we're already doing? And the other part that I think helps too is when we're teaching in this way and when we're thinking about students in this way, it makes our lives so much easier. It's better for the students, but it's also better for us. I know just for myself, the more that I've incorporated these practices, the smoother that my classes go, right? The less behavior issues that I have, the more respect there is, the more fun there is in the classroom. So I think that sometimes helps to take the ease off, because as an educator, there's always new initiatives, right? There's stuff with AI, there's technology, there's always new things being thrown at us. But this is different. I think about this as like the foundation of teaching. Like before we can teach and learn, we have to create the safe place. Right? When we have the safe space, then we can add all the other stuff. So let's take care of the foundation first. And truly, teachers are the most important part, right? They are the most important resource of that classroom. If you don't have teachers who are well and healthy and taking good care of themselves, it's not going to matter what cool, fancy tools you have in that classroom, right? It's the teachers that matter.
I 100% agree with you. That we have to have educators that are happy, healthy, regulated, and we all have off days, but we have to take care of our staff so that we can give to the kids. We can't expect people to give when their tanks are empty. So how can we support our teachers? Absolutely, 100%. And I love that. I say that about trauma-informed and resilience-focused practices too. It's like, what do we know about brain science, right? If we're not regulated and calm, we don't have access to our thinking brains, all the things that kids need to learn. That we have to be able to have that trauma-informed, resilience-focused. It's like the umbrella that everything is under. So if we don't have those in place, and so many schools are doing things that are doing a lot of those pieces already, but it provides a framework so that you can see what you're doing, what areas you might need to focus more on, like you mentioned earlier. It provides that framework so that you can check in and see maybe what needs to be improved, what you're doing really well already, because schools are already doing some things well. We might need to work on some spots.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, that framework is like, that just makes it so much clearer, right? Because otherwise we're doing random pieces here and there, but you're like, I see how this all fits together.
If you don't mind describing how you've been certified as a trainer, and then you've continued to train other specialists in your school, in your district. Can you explain like the history of that so far for you in your school and district?
Yeah. So the plan was initially that we were going to, because we have trauma-informed teams in our school. So the plan was we were just going to train all of them. But as you know, in schools, finding time to all be together is like the craziest puzzle that sometimes is not quite solvable. So that didn't end up happening in that way. So we started offering it for whatever teachers wanted in our district in the summertime. And so I started that way. That was like the first training that I did, which I was like so nervous about, because it's like, it's different when it's like people because you're like, I want this to be like really good. Like I want them to like, they're counting on me.
All the time after that.
I can't mess this
up. You never see them again.
They're giving you 2 days of their summertime, and it's like,
yes, 2 days of summertime. So like you really you gotta get this right. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, those were successful, and they loved it so much that that's something that we keep talking about bringing back into our school, into our school district. And then I also worked with, there's a really great nonprofit in New Jersey. It was called Campfire. They just changed it. I think the new name is Ember. But they do amazing work in New Jersey, working in different schools, and they go in and do a lot of SEL work. And so I did some trauma-informed training for them, and that was also really impactful because they kind of they already have some of these ideas, like they were already kind of in this path. So it was great to give a little bit more of that framework like we were talking about, to give more resources, some more examples, some ideas of things that they can do in the work that they're already doing, to really build from that. And then also working with different school districts. And I love that when it's a district or a whole school and you have people from all different backgrounds. I think that's the most helpful, because then you have a team and everyone's kind of on board, and it becomes more school-wide instead of a few people doing some different things in their classroom, but it becomes more of a common language. There's more of an understanding, more expectations built around, what does this look like for our building?
And that's why we are so aligned, Stefanie, because that's actually Starr's theory of change, which is something new that we've added. It wasn't in place when you went through our courses, but our theory of change is that when trauma-informed, resilience-focused individuals work within a trauma-informed, resilience-focused system, we know that's when the best chance for children's well-being and success to increase. Because you could have the most trauma-informed, resilience-focused classroom, but if your system isn't trauma-informed, resilience-focused, you can do good stuff for kids in that classroom, right? But say we have, places that their code of conduct is still like 3 strikes and you're out, or 0 tolerance, right? Not the most trauma-informed, but you can have the best classroom when you're still doing good for kids. But overall, right, there's still some things that maybe aren't best system-wide. So yeah, you got it. That's our theory of change, that we want to create that. We can still do good stuff in a one-day training, but overall, like having that systematic approach with the whole school, that's when we know that's the best chance for the overall success and well-being of kiddos to increase.
You're a certified trainer, and you're certifying specialists in your school system, but you're also going out to other districts. I'm sure other trainers would love to hear, how have you reached out to other districts? How have you made contact, and how, you know what I mean? And how have you been able to go to spread the word about what you can offer?
Yeah. So right now, a lot of social media, but as state teacher of the year, I'm on loan to the state for the year. So that kind of helps. So I offer all of it for free. So that really, that's kind of what's gotten me out there. Like, yeah, free always helps. So that's been really helpful, because I kind of can ask different districts, like, what would you like me to offer? And because, I have this whole year to support all the different schools in New Jersey, that's given me a lot more reach that way. So we'll see what happens after this. But yeah, and social media has helped, because as I'm posting things and people are seeing what we're doing, I think that people have reached out to me after asking more questions and wanting to know more about it. So
the whole year you're pretty much kind of like integrated with the state, and you're going to districts all around the state and supporting them in different ways. Wow, interesting. Well, let's talk about that. The recognition of State Teacher of the Year. Congratulations again. If you could just describe a little bit further, like what you just started to talk about. So how obviously your year looks totally different than your average year. You're fully on sabbatical, out of the classroom, and you're just integrating with other districts. Can you just describe more what that looks like week to week?
Yeah, absolutely. So ETS, Educational Testing Services, they fund my sabbatical. So it's not, from the state or anything like that. It's an outside provider, which is amazing. So because of that, I also partner with the NJDOE and then NJEA. So NJEA is our New Jersey Education Association. So they actually lease a car for me, and they pay the gas and all of that. So it's amazing, because I'm literally driving all over the state of New Jersey. So I'm very grateful for that. And they provide also a clothing allowance, so that I'm able to, dress more professionally, not just like in a classroom.
That's amazing.
Comfy. So yeah, so there's some really great support that I have. So of January to June, that I'll be out of the classroom. So I'm coming towards the end already of it. And during this time, I have a cubicle at NJDOE, which is great. So I actually partner and work with all different people in NJDOE. I actually worked on a mindfulness section that is now on the New Jersey Department of Education's website, and I'm so thrilled. There are handouts for educators that are free, and we got to make some videos, so that was part of my role as state teacher. It's getting to do that. And then really partnering with all the county teachers of the year. So I work with them. I get to visit them at their schools. We partner together on different passion projects. And then any other school district can ask me to come in and speak. I've been to a bunch of different conferences, which has been really fun. I've done some school assemblies, which is also really cool, working with all different grade levels. So it's been pretty wide experience. I also get to work with the colleges and universities, so all the ones that have teacher prep programs. So I actually got to speak at one yesterday for their clinical intern awards. So there's lots of different opportunities to support education across New Jersey. So having this time it's been so helpful. It's so wonderful. And there's also all the state teachers of the year. So I meet with all the state teachers of the year as well. We met in California. I'll be seeing them at Space Camp this summer. So that's going to be really cool. Yeah, I have no idea what to expect. But it's going to be wild. I haven't been to camp in a while, so this is going to be like the ultimate
all
version.
Of the state teachers of the year go to Space Camp together?
Yes, we go to Space Camp together.
That's awesome.
Yes, I'm really excited.
Like we're talking like NASA stuff, like that kind of space.
Yes, in Huntsville, Alabama. And there's going to be a lot of team building from what I understand. I don't know the rest of it, but I'm excited to learn and see. And then in September, we go to Washington, D.C. for our D.C. week. And yeah, there's a lot of different opportunities for us.
That is, well, it's well deserved. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a really, it's got to be a really interesting, different kind of year for, outside of the norm. What kind of opportunities do you think it's opening up and, might make the, subsequent years look different for you? What do you think you're heading with it?
That is a great question. I think about that probably every day. Right now, my plan is still to go back into the classroom for the coming year. I'm really excited to be back and see some of my students, but I am really loving growing in sharing trauma-informed practices and in sharing mindfulness. So I'd love to continue to do the trainings I've been doing, to keep teaching professional developments. I wrote a book called Let the Glitter Settle, which is about mindfulness for teens. So I'd love to be doing some more book talks and sharing that widely. I'm in the final stages of editing. This is like that last moment. This is like my baby. I feel like this is like a whole giving birth process. So like we're fully at the very end of this process. So yeah, I'm very excited. And yeah, with that comes like all the nervousness because like I've been holding on to this baby for a long time and I'm excited for people to have it, but yeah, also nervous to let her out in the wild. This really was like heart work for me because I was teaching mindfulness in school and kids would email me and ask questions. And I was like, I wanted to follow them on their journey. I wanted to give them something so that they could keep up this practice and just kind of have like a piece of me. So that was the idea behind the book. So in the book, I share a little bit about my story. I talk about mindfulness, what it is, and then I go through a bunch of different practices throughout, and then there's spaces to reflect on that experience. So it's kind of like a toolkit. So it's great for teens, but honestly, it works for adults as well. So there's different resources to use and to try out and practice.
If you think back to all the times that you've either been training someone in a professional development session, and I just think trauma-informed resilience focus is who you are. So it doesn't matter what topic you're training. That's just because it's an approach, it's a mindset, right? So whether it's our specific content or one of the other things that you train, is there been, because I have like set moments in my mind of times that most of the time in live trainings where I've trained people that some that are just like, they were scary. And some that are just like, these wow moments where I've seen people like really get the concepts and really had like, oh, so this is what this kid, like a lot of times it's around like the private logic assessment with the behavior support plan, when people really start to get why kids do what they do. So if you have any moments like that you can share, like where you really have discovered or you're thinking that you're really getting through to the participants in your trainings or when you've been coaching someone one-on-one or something like that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a great story. I know oftentimes the people who seem to like have the most questions or want to have like a gotcha, but like, what about this? But what about that? I love that. I'm like, yes, let's really talk about that.
Yeah, I like that too.
And I love when they feel like they can ask that because that's when the uncovering really happens, right? That's when the uncovering really happens. And sometimes I don't have all the answers, but we can think together as a group. Because when they'll say things like, well, he just wants to get on my nerves, or, none of this is true because this kid just, and then whatever, insert statement here. So really thinking about like, well, what's really behind that and looking at, like you said, the private logic and really having that time to dive in and explore and think about, what's behind, what's underlying all of that. Yeah. I wish I had a really good story, but
oh no, you're good. No, even like your reframe right there. A lot of people think when audience members, they would see that almost as argumentative or trying to prove you wrong. But I view it the same way you did. I'm so glad you shared that. That's they're trusting you. They're sharing what they're thinking. I would much rather someone throw that stuff at me at a training. Like I call it, let's play Stump Kathy time because I think that's fun. But it's, I'd rather them throw that out to me than sit there and, and keep those thoughts in their head and just think, oh, this training doesn't make any sense. I don't even care about it. Like, tell me what you're thinking. Let's work through it. And I'm not the expert in the room. We're all here to collaborate and learn together. So let's all talk about it together and come up with a solution. But like, to me, like that's a good sign that people are engaging because I want to help them. I don't want them just to sit there and be frustrated. Let's talk through it. So no, I love that example.
I think there's like a certain level of extra discomfort that comes just before like transformation, and so that's almost like you said, people are really engaged at that point because they're like really, it's starting to like, oh, I'm going to have to change my mindset.
They're questioning it because they
I
want
was
to
so
make sure they
certain
want
for
to try
such a
it.
long time, and now I'm changing my mindset, and it gets uncomfortable at that point. And then but that's good.
Point,
They're
Ben.
engaged. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've had a couple who are like, I guess, not sure about how to start, but I think honestly, the training is so thorough. And anytime we do any part of it, we always talk about how does this make sense for your learning space? Because that's the other thing, is not everyone that I work with is always a teacher. And so thinking about like your learning space, where you interact and work with kids, how does this work for you? And sometimes we just have to kind of like talk it out again. The hesitancies mostly have been from like, I don't know if I can do this, or a little bit of, this isn't my area of expertise. Like there's a little bit of that, like, there's counselors, and they do this. Like, I'm not a counselor. And that's one of the things I talk about is I'm not a counselor either. And I'm not interested in doing any of that with them, but I'm here to create a safe space for my students that is going to help them to learn. And so having some of this as a background is going to help me to do that. So it's giving me the tools to be able to be a better teacher, not to cure anything, solve anything, but to help them to get their needs met so that they can learn in a better environment.
That's why we love teachers as trainers, right? Because they're like, well, you're a counselor, you've not been a teacher, you've not been in a classroom. But that's one of the reasons why I love teachers as trainers, because we're not asking teachers to be counselors. And I try to be very clear about that. That is not the job of a school. That's why we have behavioral health supports and community mental health agencies coming along a lot of our school systems. That's not your job, and we don't want that to be your job. Your job is to teach kids, and if they need more supports, to go to the resources that are available for you. So I'm glad that you said that.
The last question we had on the list is, if you could offer advice to an educator who's just getting started with trauma-informed work and maybe hasn't seen the results yet, but is kind of at the beginning of their journey, what advice would you give them?
Just to keep on keeping on, because sometimes it feels like, like you're doing these things and nothing's changing. So just to keep up with the great work you're doing, and to not forget that there's already so much that you're doing that you maybe don't realize is connected to this. So give yourself credit. And, the more that we're learning, the better that we do. And so don't shame or blame yourself when you're like, I can't believe I did that before. Like, we all are in that learning process, and it's okay. We've made mistakes in the past, but we've learned from them. And now that we have the new information we have, just to keep moving forward with that.
That's good. I love that idea of acknowledging what people already have been doing, just through their own, just through their own empathy.
Yeah. I always start my trainings that way too. Like, I want to acknowledge the wisdom in the room. I want to acknowledge, everyone's backgrounds as we come together, because in this moment I'm going to share this, but there are going to be many opportunities where I'm not going to have an answer, but we all have different lived experiences. And I want to tap into that, because when we tap into what's in our learning space, we can just do so much more. It's not just me. I'm not a sage on the stage. I don't know everything. But I do have some background and resources to share. And now we're going to build and grow together.